faith is required beyond understanding. And let me tell you something today. Faith is not about what you can see. Faith is about stepping into what you cannot see, what you do not understand, and trusting that God has already worked it out. It is easy to trust when you have all the answers, when the road is well lit, and when the plan is laid out before you. But what happens when you don't understand? What happens when you don't see the way? What happens when life throws a storm your way and all you have left is faith? That, my friends, is the essence of true trust. That is what it means to lean not on your own understanding, but to rely fully on the divine plan. I'm talking to somebody right now who is in a season of uncertainty. You don't know what's coming next. You don't know how to fix what's broken. You don't understand why you had to go through what you went through, and yet faith is calling you to trust beyond your understanding. Faith is requiring you to walk forward when everything in you wants to stay still. Faith is demanding that you believe when the evidence around you suggests otherwise. You see, if you could understand everything, you wouldn't need faith. If you could calculate every outcome, if you could predict every twist and turn, then trust would be unnecessary. But faith is the evidence of things not seen. Faith is walking into the unknown with confidence, knowing that God has already gone before you and made a way. Let me take you to Abraham. God called him out of his homeland, out of everything familiar, and told him to go to a place that he would show him. He didn't give him a map. He didn't give him step-by-step directions. He simply said, go, and Abraham went. That's faith. Faith is leaving without all the details. Faith is trusting when the picture isn't clear. Faith is believing that even in uncertainty, God's promise will stand. I don't know who needs to hear this today. But stop waiting to understand before you obey. Stop waiting for clarity before you take the next step. Some of you are delaying your breakthrough because you are waiting for understanding. But understanding is not a prerequisite for faith. Obedience comes first. The blessing comes after the obedience. Faith is required beyond understanding when the job doesn't come through, when the business doesn't succeed, when the relationship falls apart, when the healing hasn't manifested yet, when the prayer seems unanswered. This is the moment where faith must rise up. This is the moment where you have to dig deep and say, God, I don't get it, but I trust you. I don't see it, but I believe you. I don't understand it, but I know you are working it for my good. Let me take you to the story of Joseph. Betrayed, sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned, forgotten. If Joseph had leaned on his understanding, he would have given up in that pit. If he had trusted only what he could see, he would have lost hope in that prison cell. But Joseph had faith beyond understanding. And because of that faith, what was meant for evil turned into good. Because of that faith, a prisoner became a prime minister. Because of that faith, what seemed like a setback was really a setup. Oh, somebody needs to hear this. Your setback is a setup. Your confusion is not the end of your story. Your pain has a purpose. Your struggle has significance. And just because you don't understand it right now, doesn't mean God isn't working behind the scenes. Faith is trusting that He is orchestrating every detail, that He is aligning every piece, that He is preparing every blessing, even when you cannot see it. So what do you do when you don't understand? You keep walking. You keep praying. You keep believing. You keep trusting. You do not let the lack of clarity stop you from moving forward. Because faith is not about understanding. It's about believing that God's plan is greater than your perception. Listen, you don't have to know how it's going to work out. You just have to know who is working it out. And if he is for you, then who can be against you? If he has spoken it, then it will come to pass. If he has promised it, then it will manifest in due season. Faith is required beyond understanding. And when you step out in that faith, when you trust in that uncertainty, when you walk in obedience despite not knowing the full picture, you will see God move in ways you never imagined. Because faith is not about knowing, it's about trusting. Somebody shout, "I trust you, Lord." Say it like you mean it. Say it until your faith rises up. Say it until your doubt has to leave. Say it until your spirit is strengthened. Say it until you believe it with every fiber of your being, because faith is required beyond understanding. And if you trust him, if you believe him, if you walk in obedience despite not understanding, you will see his glory revealed in your life in ways you never thought possible. Obedience precedes clarity. You cannot wait for all the details before you step into your purpose. You cannot demand a full explanation before you walk in obedience. Obedience must come first. Then and only then will clarity follow. This is not about knowing all the answers. This is about trusting the one who holds the answers. God does not give you a blueprint in advance. He does not provide step-by-step instructions before requiring you to move. He says, go, and then he reveals. He says, move, and then he directs. You cannot wait until you understand before you obey, because understanding comes on the other side of obedience. Some of you are waiting for clarity before you take that next step. You want the full picture before you make a move, but God is calling you to obedience first. He is saying, trust me enough to move before you understand, because if you could see it all in advance, it wouldn't be faith. If you had all the answers up front, there would be no need for trust. Look at Noah. God told him to build an ark when there was no sign of rain, no explanation, no weather forecast, no logical reason to start construction. But Noah obeyed. And because he obeyed, clarity came. The rain came. The purpose of the ark was revealed, but obedience had to come first. Look at Abraham. God told him to leave his homeland, his family, his comfort zone, and go to a place that he would show him. Not a place that was already mapped out, not a destination with clear directions. But Abraham obeyed. And because he obeyed, clarity came, the promise unfolded, the destiny was revealed. But obedience had to come first. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you cannot wait to understand before you obey. Some of you have been praying for clarity, but God has already given you an instruction, and until you move on that instruction, you will not receive the clarity you are waiting for. Stop waiting for God to show you the entire staircase. He's asking you to take the first step. Stop demanding explanations before you take action. Obedience comes first. There are blessings on the other side of obedience. There are breakthroughs waiting beyond your willingness to trust. There are miracles assigned to your faithfulness. But as long as you hesitate, as long as you delay, as long as you demand clarity before you move, you are postponing what God has already prepared for you. I'm talking to somebody right now who is standing at the edge of a decision. You feel the tug. You know what God has placed on your heart. But fear is making you hesitate. Doubt is making you question. Uncertainty is holding you back. But let me tell you something. Your obedience is the key to your clarity. Your willingness to move is the very thing that will open the door to understanding. You see, obedience doesn't always make sense at the moment. It doesn't always fit into human reasoning. But faith is not about logic, it's about trust. Faith is not about sight, it's about believing beyond what you can see. And if you will obey, if you will move forward even without full clarity, you will see God move in ways you never imagined. Think about Peter. He saw Jesus walking on the water and Jesus told him to come. Now, in the natural, it didn't make sense. Water isn't something you walk on. But Peter obeyed, and as he stepped out, the water held him up. The miracle was in the obedience. The supernatural was in the trust. But clarity didn't come until after he moved. So what are you waiting for? What is keeping you from taking that step of faith? What excuse have you been using to delay your obedience? Because the longer you wait, the longer you delay what God wants to do in your life. The longer you hesitate, the more time you waste in uncertainty. But if you will obey first, if you will trust first, if you will move first, clarity will follow. Listen, obedience precedes clarity. Not the other way around. You have to step before you see. You have to trust before you understand. You have to believe before the answer is revealed. That is faith. That is trust. That is what it means to walk with God. So today I challenge you, stop waiting for clarity before you obey. Stop demanding explanations before you move. Trust that God knows what He's doing. Trust that His plan is bigger than your perception. Trust that if He said it, He will bring it to pass. And when you step out in obedience, when you move forward without all the answers, when you walk by faith and not by sight, you will see the clarity, the direction, and the blessing that have been waiting for you all along. Obedience comes first, clarity comes after. And when you step out in faith, you will discover that God had everything worked out before you even took the first step. Delay is not denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Just because you are waiting doesn't mean God has forgotten you. Delay is not denial. When you trust, when you believe, when you walk by faith and not by sight, you must understand that God's timing is different from yours. He is never late and He is never early. He is always right on time. Some of you have been praying for something, believing for something, holding on to a promise, and yet it seems like nothing is happening. The enemy wants you to think that because there is a delay, you have been denied. He wants you to believe that God has said no, when in reality God is saying, not yet. There is a difference. A delay is not a denial. It is a season of preparation, of refining, of strengthening. Look at Joseph. He had a dream of leadership, of influence, of greatness. But before the dream came to pass, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, wrongfully accused, and locked in a prison. If Joseph had looked at his circumstances alone, he would have thought the dream was denied. But the delay was not a denial, it was a setup. It was a preparation for what was coming, and when the time was right, the very delay that looked like a setback became the launch pad for his promotion. Some of you are frustrated because you are in a waiting season. You feel stuck. You feel overlooked. You feel forgotten. But let me tell you, God has not forgotten you. He sees you. He hears your prayers. He knows your desires, and He is working behind the scenes even when you can't see it. There are some things that take time to develop. There are some promises that require preparation before manifestation. And if you rush the process, you will miss the fullness of the blessing. Think about David. He was anointed king as a young man, but he didn't step into the throne overnight. There was a process. There were battles to fight. There were enemies to overcome. There was a season of waiting before the promise was fulfilled. But the delay was not denial. It was preparation for the position God had for him. Waiting is hard. Waiting tests your faith. Waiting makes you question if you heard God right. But waiting also strengthens you. It teaches you to trust. It refines your character. It prepares you for the weight of the blessing. Because some of you are asking God for things that you are not yet ready to handle. Some of you are praying for open doors, but if God opened them now, they would crush you under the weight of the responsibility. The delay is not to harm you, it is to prepare you. So what do you do in the waiting? You stay faithful. You keep praying, you keep believing, you keep working, you keep serving. Because when the time is right, when the season shifts, when the door opens, you will be ready. You will step into it with strength. You will walk into it with confidence. You will embrace it fully because you allowed God to prepare you in the waiting. Think about Sarah and Abraham. They were promised a child, but the child did not come immediately. Years went by. Doubts crept in. They even tried to make things happen on their own, but the promise had an appointed time. And when that time came, Isaac was born. The delay was not denial, it was a divine schedule. I don't know who I'm talking to, but you have been crying out asking God why it hasn't happened yet. You have been wondering if you missed your moment, if your time has passed, if your dream is dead. But I came to tell you, the delay is not denial. God is still in control. His promises are still true. His timing is still perfect. And when he says it's time, nothing and no one can stop what he has ordained for your life. So don't quit in the waiting. Don't give up in the delay. Hold on to your faith. Keep trusting. Keep expecting. Because when the promise comes to pass, when the breakthrough happens, when the door opens, you will know that it was worth the wait. And you will testify that the delay was not denial, it was preparation for something greater than you ever imagined.